Welcome to Camp Peculiar. My name is Aaron, and this is a channel for visual storytelling using AI art. And today we're continuing our series on animated visual storytelling using the free Unity game engine. This is video 3 in the playlist where we're covering cameras using Cinemachine, recording using the Unity Recorder, and sequencing using timelines. So here's the scene that I've been working on for this series. It's a city scene with some buildings, trees, a little room behind one of the windows there, and we made it in the first 2 videos. If you missed those, go ahead and check out the playlist. So we want to add some camera movements to this scene. Maybe we'll start here with a wide angle, go into the trees, and then come up to this little room right here where a character will appear. This is really fun and easy to do if you have the free package that's now owned by Unity called Cinemachine. To get this free package into your project, just go to Window and then choose Package Manager. Make sure you're looking at the Unity registry for packages. The Unity registry setting here only shows you packages that are sort of like free to use and kind of supported by Unity, and they sort of increase the functionality or features of a particular project. You can see the other options here like My Assets. If you selected that, it would show you all of the assets or packages that you had purchased from the Unity asset website. The assets in this project setting will show you ones that are currently installed, ones that were installed by the template you chose or ones that you've installed since then. So with Unity registry selected over here on the left, I'm going to head over to the right to this little search area and type in Cinemachine or just Cin, and then I'll go ahead and hit the install button. It will download the scripts and files that are associated with that particular package, and it's all installed. The next thing we need to do is now change our search from Cinemachine to Recorder, and then we're looking for this one by Unity here. We're going to go ahead and do the same thing there. Hit install. That's all we need, Cinemachine and Recorder. Now, in order to use Cinemachine and Recorder and all that fancy camera stuff that we just got access to, we're going to need a timeline. A timeline in Unity refers to both a window and a component. The timeline window is sort of like that lower area in Premiere. It's where we're going to add our camera clips and make adjustments and things like that. The timeline component is something we're going to attach to a game object, and it's just a helper file that maintains all the settings for this particular timeline because you can have multiple of them. But don't worry, today we're just going to have the one. All right, so now let's make the timeline window visible, and we'll just do that by going to Window, Sequence, Timeline. And you can see now we have the timeline tab up there at the top and it's empty, and you can leave it there if you want, but I suggest dragging it into the lower area here at the bottom next to your project and console tabs. All right, so now we have the work area that we're going to assemble our camera clips in. Now we just need to add a timeline component to something. If you notice now, the timeline window is empty and it would like us to create this component. It's worth noting that you can add this timeline component to anything. You can put it on a camera, you can put it on a polygon, you really can put it anywhere. But because this is a game engine, and in game engines, sometimes things are active or not active or removed or despawned or whatever, I like to create an empty game object to add my timeline component to, just so I know where it is and I can keep track of it. So let's do that now. Over on the left side in the hierarchy, we'll go ahead and right click, create empty game object, and I'll just name it timeline. And with that empty game object selected and our timeline window visible, you will see a little create button down there. And so we're going to click that create button to add the timeline component onto that empty game object that we named timeline. Unity is going to save all of our data or our settings about this timeline in a little helper file, and it would like to know where you would like to save that helper file. It has to be in your Unity Projects Assets folder, which is what we're looking at now. I'm a bit of a neat freak when it comes to organizing projects, so I'm going to create a new folder inside the Assets folder called Timelines, and I'm just going to save my little timeline helper file in there. This is totally optional. If you have a messy desktop and you're really comfortable with that, then just save it in the Unity Assets folder at the top default location, whatever it presented to you when you clicked on that Create button. So here's what we have so far. We have a game object that we named timeline. We attached a timeline object sort of helper file component to it, and we have the timeline window visible. So now when we click on that empty game object called timeline, we see something that looks a little bit more like Premiere. It has shuttle, transport, or play and fast forward controls up along the left there. It has an empty area where all our different tracks will go. And then on the middle right area here, we have the big timeline window, which has numbers increasing from left to right, which in this case is frame numbers, but you could also switch this to time code if you'd like. And here's something that's annoying. Because any object can have a timeline component on it, anytime that you select a new object, like a light or something, in your scene hierarchy, your timeline window down below will update with that particular object's timeline component. And since all of those objects aren't going to have timeline components on it, you'll see it becomes really annoying that your timeline, your work area, goes away every time you select a new object. Luckily, Unity has a really easy way to fix this. Go ahead and select the object that has your timeline component on it, probably called timeline. And then in the lower timeline window, look in the upper right-hand corner, you'll see a tiny little lock. Just click that lock, and that lets Unity know that you would like this timeline locked in place. And even if you select another object that has a timeline component on it, it's going to keep this one in view for you. All right, now it's time to add some cameras. You should already have a main camera in your project, and if you do, you're already ready to go. You get to skip this step. But if you don't, if you somehow find yourself in a Unity project that does not have a main camera or any camera at all, just go ahead and right-click in the hierarchy and select camera. Now, the way Cinemachine actually works behind the scenes is very complicated and complex and super neat and very technical, and I'm just going to throw all of that information out the window and give you my definition, which I think will be more helpful. Cinemachine, when used in conjunction with the timeline the way that we are, is really just about creating bookmarks of different camera positions and settings, and then smoothly transitioning between those bookmarks in a really smart and fun and animated way. That's really it. Cinemachine lets you save a bunch of camera positions and settings, and then it will automatically animate between those settings and positions for you. And to be fair, these bookmarks, well, they're not called bookmarks at all, actually. In Cinemachine, they're called virtual cameras, which sounds very technical, and I guess it probably is. But really, the virtual cameras we're going to be creating today are just wrappers or just containers that are housing a bunch of particular camera settings, and Cinemachine is going to animate or move between those settings. So because these virtual cameras aren't really cameras themselves, and they're more like bookmarks that are just a collection of settings about cameras, on our main camera, we need to add something that can keep track of all those bookmarks, like a bookmark manager, if you will. But in Unity, when using Cinemachine, we don't call that a bookmark manager. We call that the Cinemachine brain. And the Cinemachine brain component or script, we can really attach it to any game object we want, but it makes sense to attach it to your main camera. And that component is responsible for behind the scenes managing everything that Cinemachine does. So we're going to select the main camera. That's a good place to add the Cinemachine brain. And then over on the right, we're going to choose Add Component. And then in the search field, start typing Cinemachine, and then find Cinemachine brain and just click on that. And that's really all you need to do. So now we have an empty game object called Timeline that's managing our timeline. We have a Cinemachine brain, which is like a bookmark manager that is added to our main camera. And we are ready to start adding bookmarks or virtual cameras to our scene. And adding a virtual camera is really easy. In the hierarchy, just right-click, select the Cinemachine sort of fly-out menu there, and then choose Virtual Camera. There's a lot of different things we can add using that menu. We'll go over all of them in time. Today, all we want to do is add a virtual camera. So now the main camera with the Cinemachine brain script attached to it, it's no longer using its settings to show us what's going on in the game. It's now using this virtual camera's settings. And we can see this by looking at the game window. So find your game window. It's probably next to your scene window and click on that. It's kind of annoying to have to click back and forth between the two. So I'm going to drag my game window just to the right side of the scene project window here so I can see them both at the same time. And this is as good a time as any to adjust the aspect ratio. So in the game window, look up in the top left of that window there and you'll see the aspect ratio. It might be set to free or something like that. Go ahead and click that little flyout and change it to 16:9 if you plan on heading to YouTube with this stuff, or you can add a custom aspect ratio for 9:16 if you're going to Reels or Shorts. You can change the background or scene color of your camera, not using the virtual camera, but by clicking on the main camera, you'll see a little background color swatch there, and you can change that to whatever you want. Now I can move around this virtual camera / bookmark thing by selecting it over in the hierarchy, and you'll see the game window will update with that camera's location, rotation, and settings. Now, we aren't going to place keyframes or animate these cameras, although you can do that, and you can do that in conjunction with the method I'm about to show you. Instead, we're just going to create a bunch of virtual cameras, move them into positions we like, and then Cinemachine will animate between them for us automatically. All right, so back here in our city set that we've been working with, I'm going to create a new virtual camera / like camera bookmark, and I'm going to call it wide angle, or I'll name it VC for virtual camera wide. And then I'm going to move that back and frame it up by looking in the game window until I have a nice wide establishing shot. Next thing I'll do is create another virtual camera, and I'll call this one VC trees for virtual camera trees, and I'll move that to the tree line or some other kind of just contextual setup establishing mood, feel, lighting, time of day type shot. The third one I'll call window or something like that. I'm going to move it into position so it's looking right into that window. With your virtual camera selected over on the right in the inspector area, you can adjust that vertical FOV field of view setting there to sort of fine-tune your shot a little bit. Now, to get Cinemachine to move between these cameras, all we need to do is add a track to our timeline below. So with the empty game object called timeline selected, right-click in the left area of the timeline window and choose Cinemachine track. Now you can see there's all sorts of different types of tracks that you can create in here, and they're all super useful, and again, we'll go over them in time. But right now, we just need to create a Cinemachine track. Now, when we create that track, we can see the name of it over on the left-hand side, and this one has some information we need to enter. The Cinemachine track needs to know where that bookmark manager is that we created earlier. And if you remember, the bookmark manager isn't called bookmark manager at all. It's called Cinemachine brain. So whatever object you added the Cinemachine brain script to needs to be dragged into this little slot. Hopefully for most of you, that's your main camera. That's where you added it. So grab the main camera, left click, hold down, and drag it into that slot. And you'll see the title of it update there. The next thing we want to do is click on the virtual camera that is our first shot, or the shot we'd like to work with first. So for mine, it's going to be that wide establishing shot. I'm just going to left click, hold down on that, and drag it onto that Cinemachine track. And you can see it creates something that looks very Premiere-like. It looks like it dragged a clip in there, and it did, but this clip doesn't have video footage on it. This clip represents the amount of time you would like to stay at this particular camera. And this is a great time to keep in mind that game engines run usually at 60 frames per second or faster, which is what we'll be exporting video as. If that's a problem for you, you can go ahead and in the upper right, where we earlier locked down our timeline window, you'll also see a gear cog setting thing there. Click on that setting and you can try to adjust the frames per second down to 24 or 30 or whatever works for you. Time to add another virtual camera or another sort of bookmarked position of a shot, and that one's going to be the tree line shot. So I'm going to find that virtual camera, VC trees or tree line, left click and drag that onto the same track. And then make sure it's aligned and all cuddled up right next to that first clip. Should just be right at the end of it there. And now when you hit play on the lower left play button, not the big play button at the top, we're going to use that one in a second, but the one on the timeline window in the lower left. When you click on that play button, Unity will move between those two cameras and just pop from one to the other. You can also drag the playhead slider and move it to the left or right, and you can see Cinemachine jumping from our first camera, the wide angle, to our tree line camera shot. Now that works great and all, but it's really not that cool. To make it cool, go ahead and select that second clip in the track editor down in the timeline window where we added that second camera clip. Left click and drag it to the left and it will start to overlap that first clip. Now this is something you can't do in Premiere. You can't overlap and blend clips like this easily. If you were to do this behavior in Premiere, it would just get rid of that part of the movie that you were overlapping. But in Cinemachine, it does allow you to overlap. And what this tells Cinemachine is that where they are overlapping, you would like a transition to occur between the two different saved camera positions. So here, where these two clips are overlapping, we're going to be moving from this wide establishing shot, and it's going to zoom into this tree line shot. Worth noting, if you add a new virtual camera while you have clips on your timeline, you might not see your game window update, and that's because your playhead is over the top of a different virtual camera that's in the timeline and it has priority. So just move the playhead off to the right where there aren't any virtual camera clips, and then you will see whatever camera you have selected in the hierarchy. So now with this information, you can just add as many virtual cameras as you want, move them into position, adjust their rotation, adjust their field of view, all the things that you want to adjust. And then when you have a shot that you like, drag it into the sequence where it should go. Adjust the time for about how long you think characters will be speaking or doing action on the screen. Again, in Premiere, you can always just slow or speed these clips duration up to allow for more time or less time. And then overlap those clips where you want animated transitions to occur. So when you have all of your virtual cameras that you want added to your sequence and you have them all kind of spaced out at the right timing you'd like and overlapped where you'd like transitions, now what you want to do is save it to a video so you can bring it into Premiere and add sound or dialogue bubbles or whatever it is that you want to do. So this is pretty easy to do. Again, in the timeline window where all your virtual cameras are, we're going to right click along the left side, but instead of adding a Cinemachine track, we're going to go all the way to the bottom and add a Unity Recorder timeline track. All that did was create the track, but it didn't create a clip on that track. And so now we need to right-click in the track area below the clips for our virtual cameras and choose Add Recorder Clip. Now, the length of this clip and where it's located on the timeline indicates where the recorder is going to save footage from. Generally speaking, you want this clip to be as long as your total sequence and to start at the beginning. But maybe you just want to capture just a little portion of some movement, or you need to re-record something. You can make this clip shorter and move it to the area that you want to recapture. Next, let's adjust the output settings for this recorder track. So with the recorder track selected, if you look on the right under the inspector, you see a bunch of different settings. And the only ones we want to adjust today is the save path. So click on the 3 little ellipsy dots there, and you can choose a location to save videos when you render them. Then we're going to choose the output resolution dropdown that's under the capture area just right above. And I'm going to change mine to 1080p. You can set yours to 4K, 2K, or whatever you want. Now that we've determined a location for Unity to save our movies and we've set the output resolution, we can finally hit the big play button at the top of Unity. This is what actually invokes the recording. There's not a render button that you might find in a 3D package. There's not an export to media encoder that you might find in Premiere, and there's not like an add to render queue button. The way that you get video out of Unity is by hitting the play button. So once you press that play button, Unity will go into game simulation mode. But instead of simulating a game, what happens is the timeline kicks off and the playhead starts moving. And anytime that there is a recorder track underneath the playhead, a frame is added to the video. And when it's done, the play button doesn't stop, it just stops recording your movie. And then you have to press the play button yourself to get it to stop. And then you can browse to the location that you chose to save your movie files in, and you will find your fresh clip exported from Unity waiting for you there. Then you can just take that clip and bring it into Premiere and add it to a bigger project, or you can add sound to it or comic bubbles or whatever it is that you want to do. Thanks for watching. I hope you found that helpful, and I hope that it gets you set up to create quick animated scenes for motion comics or other visual story projects. Hey, if you like this video, found it helpful or entertaining or educational, or it just helped you pass the time, do me a favor. Subscribe to this channel and throw a like on this video right now. It really does help out the channel, and I'll see you again next time at Camp Peculiar.